Teresa came into the sanctuary earlier this morning, she said, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on down here in the front. And you can find out more about what these are for as we close the service. But before we read the passage this morning, I think it's important to kind of set the stage, because sometimes we read these stories, we just kind of skim through them, and we don't realize some of the weight or the significance of the circumstances. In this passage, as Michelle mentioned, Jesus is going to encounter some lepers. Do you know that leprosy is still a disease today? It is completely curable now, but 2,000 years ago, it was not. It was like a death sentence. In Jesus' time, if someone was even suspected of leprosy, they were forced to live in exile. They were forced to leave their family, their community, their work, and have to live out in the outskirts. Could not come around people, could not come into town. They were reduced to begging, rummaging through trash piles, trying to find scraps to live on. They had to live in isolation. And so I think that as terrible as the physical consequences and the physical effects of leprosy were, even worse were the social and the psychological effects of living with leprosy. In Jesus' time, biblical times, the only way that a person could be readmitted back home, back into their family, back into their neighborhood, the only way that they could go back to resuming a normal way of life would be if they were to go to the priest, and the priest would inspect their skin and their sores, and if the priest determined that it was in fact not leprosy, or if the priest determined that it had been cured or cleared up, then they were admitted back home. Quite frankly, if you were diagnosed with leprosy, it was humiliating, it was devastating, it was ruining. It was like a life sentence with little hope of ever again laughing with friends, kissing your wife, holding your children or your grandchildren. I ask you, does that sound depressing? Sounds depressing, sounds heavy. So with all that said, that kind of sets the stage for Luke chapter 17. We're going to read verses 11 through 19. If you want to stand in honor of God's word, Luke chapter 17, beginning with verse 11. Jesus encountered some lepers. Listen to what happens. On his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." Father God, thank you again for the privilege and the honor and the blessing of gathering together in this place at this time. Father, thank you for your faithfulness, your promise to be with us. We trust that you are here with us, that you want to say something to us, teach something to us, minister or encourage our hearts. Father, I pray that you would find our hearts and our minds open today, receptive to what you want to do in and among us. For it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. It was August of 1987. August of 1987, I stepped onto the campus of Tribeca Nazarene College. God had called me to ministry, and so off to Tribeca I went to figure out what I needed to know in order to be a pastor. And it was sometime later that I met Amy, but August of '87 that that I went down there. In that first semester, I enrolled in my first Bible class. It was the first of many Bible classes that I would take. But that class was on the Gospel of Luke. And when they handed out the syllabus for the semester, I saw that one of the requirements for that semester, that class, was to write a paper exploring a passage from Luke's Gospel. And guess what passage that was? Luke chapter 17, 11 through 19. Now that wasn't assigned to me. I chose that. But I wrote that paper. It's called an exegesis. And you look at historical things and social things. And if you know how to do the Greek, you look at the Greek. But an exegesis. I wrote that paper on Luke chapter 17, 11 to 19. I don't have the paper saved anywhere. I don't even remember what I got for a grade. But I have lived with this passage for over 30 years now. And what's amazing is that in all of those years, I have never preached a sermon from this passage. That surprised me. Maybe it's kind of like blue cheese. Or maybe it's like kombucha. It just needs to age and ferment for a while before it's good to have. But anyway, exegeting, analyzing this story all those years ago, it really has had a formative effect on me. And I hope and pray that it also has a profound impact on you today. Jesus is in no man's land. Did you see that? He's in no man's land. He's walking along the border between Samaria and Judea. Samaria to the north, Judah to the south. And he's walking along the border. Now, Jews and Samaritans have a lot in common. Common heritage. They share the prophets. They share the promised land. They shared the historical kings of Saul and David and Solomon. They shared the history of Joshua and Moses and Abraham. But despite all that they shared in common, they hated one another. Jews and Samaritans just despised one another. They looked down on one another. They avoided even stepping into one another's territory. And I got to think about those kinds of boundaries and divisions and the territories we establish. And we live with those kinds of things, don't we? We live with those kinds of experiences where there's certain people or groups that we just avoid like the plague. People, maybe someone who has betrayed your trust. Or folks that you've got a beef with, or someone who has a beef with you. People who are living far from God, and we just avoid folks like the plague. Stay away from them. You don't want to be associated with the likes of those yahoos. Jesus is in no man's land. He's walking along the border between two territories. Territories of people who despise one another, don't want to have anything to do with one another. And Jesus is in the land in between. And he's very familiar with no man's land. He's very familiar with walking along the territory where nobody wants to be. He strolls along the border looking for people who need to know the redeeming love of God. Jesus is in no man's land, but it turns out that there are people who live there. Not by their own choice. They're excluded from both communities, and there they are in no man's land as well. And Jesus encounters them, 10 lepers. And we don't know their backstory. We don't know if before they contracted leprosy, we don't know if they were successful or highly respected in their communities, or if they were family men. We don't know if they were back alley brawlers. We don't know anything about their history. But a disease like leprosy has a way of leveling the playing field. It has a way of putting people from high position, low position, wealthy position, poor position, putting them all in the same boat. Oh, you had money in the bank? Oh, you were voted most likely to succeed by your senior class? Oh, you're from that part of town? It doesn't matter once you have leprosy. Leprosy means that you are cast out, you're cast away, you are untouchable. Leprosy means you've got to leave, that you are lost, you have to live in no man's land. And Jesus encounters 10 men who had leprosy. And they did what they're supposed to do. They stood at a distance, a long way off, and they didn't approach him. They stood off and they hollered for Jesus' attention. And I wonder, how did they know who he was? Had they heard rumors and rumblings about this man who heals cripples and restores sight to the blind and who loves the outcasts? Maybe they had heard rumors and rumblings about this man named Jesus, and when they saw him pass their way, maybe they hoped beyond hope that maybe, just maybe, he could do something for them. Maybe one of them, before he had been diagnosed with leprosy, maybe one of them was in the crowd by the Sea of Galilee, and he heard Jesus teach, and he was amazed by his teachings. Maybe another one, before he was called unclean, maybe he had seen Jesus perform a miracle. Maybe he was one of the friends who carried the friend up onto the roof. You remember? Jesus was in the house was packed with people listening to him. People were spilled out into the street. They could not get their friend to Jesus, so they went up on the roof and dug a hole through the roof and lowered their friend so that Jesus could heal him. Maybe he was one of those friends. We don't know how these guys knew about Jesus, but they believed. They believed that he could do something, maybe even something miraculous for them. They stood at a distance. They called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." I don't like that word, pity. Feel sorry for us. The Greek word for pity is eleo, and it more accurately means compassion or mercy. So what they're crying out for is, have compassion on us, which is a little bit different than have pity on me. Have mercy on us. In other words, please do something. You ever been there? You've gotten a terrible diagnosis. Your spirit cried out, "Jesus, have mercy." You got really devastating news, and you said, "Jesus, have compassion." Maybe it was a time where you felt desperate, felt like you were done with it all. You were utterly powerless. You prayed, "Oh God, please do something, because I can't do nothing." Maybe the lepers here maybe they're grasping at straws. Maybe they felt like, this is like a snowball's chance on a Kansas summer day, but we're going to cry out anyway. Maybe their hearts were full of faith. But whatever the case, they cried out. They cried out to Jesus, and they cried out for his mercy. And how does Jesus respond? Does he respond with, "Oh, hey, fellas, I've got places to go and people to see. I'll catch you on the flip side"? Does he say, "Oh, sorry, guys, I've got an appointment I just can't miss. Can I pencil you in next Thursday? Will it work?" Did he say, "Ooh, leprosy. Gosh, that stinks. That's awful. I'm so sorry. Have you tried some of Jan's kombucha?" He says, "Yes, I have." "Have you put some lavender oil on that?" No. Jesus simply said, "Hey, go show yourself to the priest." Go to the priest. And you and I, we might be offended by that. We might kind of be like Naaman from the Old Testament. You remember him? He had leprosy, and the prophet told him, "Go to the river Jordan and wash." And he was like, "Jordan, that dirty, rotten river? Aren't there better rivers back home?" We might be offended by this. Am I not important enough for you to do something for me right now? What's the priest going to do? Go to the priest. The last time they went to the priest, he declared them to be unclean. The last time they saw the priest, they lost everything. The last time they saw the priest was the last time they ever saw their home or their family. Jesus says, go, show yourself to the priest. Well, it didn't really matter what the priest had said before. The priest was actually, in that day and time, the priest was the only one who could pronounce them clean. The only one who could say that they were now restored, that they were now healed. And the lepers knew this. They knew that before they could go home, before they could hug their wives, before they could pinch their child's cheek, before they could go back to work, they knew that the priest had to give the okay. So instead of being offended like maybe we would, when Jesus said, go to the priest, they knew, or at least they had an inkling, that something big, something wonderful, something miraculous was on the verge. And so they went. They went. And I love how Luke tells us that as they went. Can you say that with me? As they went. 3 little words, right? As they went. I want you to look at the progression here. Jesus shows up in no man's land, and the lepers see him and they cry out for mercy. And Jesus says, go show yourself to the priest, and they head that way. There's something very important missing there, isn't there? They still have leprosy. But as they went. Luke doesn't tell us whether they had to go to Jerusalem or whether they could go to a nearby village. He doesn't say whether they were on the road for 30 minutes or if they had to go 3 days. But on the way, they were cleansed. As they went, they were made whole. They were healed. Their skin was restored. They were made healthy. And thus, everything that they had lost was about to be restored. Amen? I can't imagine what they must have been thinking. They cried out to Jesus out of desperation, out of misery. They obeyed him and they turned away from him with a sliver of hope. And as they went, as they walked, as they headed toward the priest, did they look at one another? Hey, Bob, that sore on your face, it's gone. Oh, look, the lesions on my arms, they're not there anymore. Hey, Joe, your foot is not oozing anymore and your big toe grew back. As they went, they were cleansed. They are walking and realize that they are healed, that their bodies are restored, and soon and very soon as the priest will see them and gives them the okay, their lives are now going to be restored to them. Yeah? What joy, what excitement, what a flood of emotions they must have been experiencing as they went. If you were one of them, if you were one of those in the group of 10, where would you have gone first? I mean, after going to the priest and getting a clean bill of health, then what? Run home and sweep your wife up in your arms? Go to the mall and get some new threads, because those leprosy threads are... Swing by the office and see if they kept the desk for you. Head over to the coffee shop, see your friends. Where would you go? Oh, the emotions that they must have felt. Their inkling was becoming a reality. Their desperation was becoming joy. Their faith had become sight. The priest. We've got to get to the priest. He's going to give us a clean bill of health. He's going to tell us it's okay to go home. He's going to let everybody in the community know that we are no longer unclean. The emotions, the thoughts, the joyful plans that they must have been thinking, and swirled thoughts and plans and emotions as they went. You know the rest of the story, don't you? You know that one of the lepers had turned in his tracks and he went back to Jesus. He essentially said, the priest can wait. The clean bill of health can wait. My family, my job, my life can wait. I've got to go back and thank the one who has done this for me. I've got to go back and thank the one who's made all this that I'm beginning to dream of again. He's the one who made it, who's making it possible. I've got to go back and thank Jesus. And we know the rest of the story, and we say kudos to the one who returned. Amen? But Jesus doesn't leave it there. Look at what he says. The leper comes back. He kneels at Jesus' feet, so grateful. He couldn't thank him enough. And Jesus says, we're not 10 healed? Where are the other 9? Can no one be found to come back? Can none be found to come back and give glory to God except this outsider? And he was a Samaritan. And he's the one who came back to thank Jesus. And here's the rub. The rub is that Jesus expects our gratitude. He expects our gratitude. He wonders why the other 9 have not come back as well. It's not that he's on an ego trip and he needs our praise, but he knows that we need to give it. It's good for the soul. It's good for the heart. It's good for our relationship with the one who has done so much for us. It's good for our relationship with the one who is so good to us. Now, why didn't the other 9 go thank Jesus? I mean, maybe they're thinking, hey, first things first. He told us to go to the priest, and so we've got to obey before we express gratitude. Were they waiting for the okay from the priest, kind of seal, the stamp of approval? Yeah, you are healed, before they go back and give thanks? Were they thinking, hey, I got my cookie, now I'm looking for some milk? What are they thinking? We know what Jesus is thinking. He expects our gratitude. And our soul needs to give it. Not later. Not when it's more convenient. Not when everything works out. Not next Sunday. But when we realize it. When we realize what God has done for us. When we see that He has heard our cry for mercy. When He has had compassion over us. When we're rescued from whatever terrible, desperate circumstances we found ourselves in, we need to go to the Lord with thanks right then and there. So, land the plane, right? Be the one. Be the one who doesn't let busyness or distraction or even blessings keep you from giving thanks. Be the one who doesn't let the long list of responsibilities, well, I got to go to the priest, and then I've got to go home, and then I got it. Don't let the long list of responsibilities keep you from going back and worshiping the Lord. Be the one who leads your friends to go back to the one who's the greatest friend of all. Be the one who bucks the curve and breaks the trend and abandons the crowd and puts his own stuff on hold. To give credit where credit is due. To say thank you, Jesus, for what you've done for me. To kneel before the Lord and acknowledge how indebted you are to Him. Be one. Don't be one of the 9. Be the one. Well, we're going to close our worship this morning with singing a song. Michelle has chosen something that she's going to lead us in. It's going to be something I think we know, and we can just sing without words on the screen. And as we sing, I invite you to move your feet. Just like the leper, when he realized what God had done for him, he turned around and he moved his feet back toward the Lord. I invite you today to move your feet. The tables here in the front have Post-it notes and pens, and I suspect that maybe it wouldn't take very long for you to think. Of answers to prayer. Ways that God has encouraged you or lifted you up recently. Ways He's touched your marriage or a loved one that's been hurting. The ways that He's provided for you financially in unexpected ways. I suspect that it wouldn't take long for us to think of things that we should be thankful for. Maybe you have whispered a prayer to Him of thanksgiving, but I invite you today to get up and move and come up and write down that which you're thankful for on one of these stations, and then come up and put it on this poster board. You just want to have a collage of thanksgiving from us today. Can we do that? Michelle, would you lead us?
The words are simple. Thank you, Lord. I just want to thank
obstacles and troubles and difficulties. It is so much better when we keep our eyes open to God's blessings, the ways that He is moving, the things that He's doing on our behalf, and to focus on those things. To have grateful hearts that are full of thanksgiving. Makes life so much better. A couple of announcements before we go our separate ways. We won't be gathering here next Sunday. We'll be joining with our brothers and sisters from around Barton County at the high school football field for Super Sunday. And that's at 10 o'clock next Sunday. Michelle, is there something that you wanted to say about that?
Saturday at 11. People are just going to be gathering around the high school stadium and the football field just to walk and to pray and just to get it covered in prayer. And everybody is welcome to come pray over this event for our city.
Right. So Saturday at 11, prayer gathering at the stadium, and then Sunday morning at 10 will be the service. They are looking for some volunteers. They need greeters and ushers and folks to help set up and tear down chairs and equipment. I don't think there's a whole lot of chairs that are set up, so it's not labor intensive, but they do need some hands to help with that. If you could help in any of those ways, let me know, and I'll let those know who are in charge of those areas. Janet, was there anything else you wanted to mention about Super Sunday? Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And then lastly, we are still needing to organize more small groups for Reset, starting September 15th. If you'd like to lead or if you'd like to host, please sign up on the sheet out in the foyer. The Lord bless you. No, He already has. May He bless you over and over again. May you be receptive and aware and recognize and quick to respond.